Well, Mac, I appreciate you joining us today. Before we get started chatting about community building, which I'm excited to talk about because that's one of the aspects that a lot of people aspire to do, but it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of buy-in from the top down that community building is going to be a long-term growth opportunity for a business. Just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, and what you do.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, Colby. So my name is Mack Garrison. I'm the co-founder and director of content at Dash. We're a high-end animation and motion design studio that believes in the power of community and creativity. And our goal is to help connect brands to their communities. So my background begins back at NC State University's College of Design. Colby and I were just chatting about some of the UNC swag that he has behind him, but we won't hold that against him on the show. But College Design, NC State was really great for me because it gave me a foundational background on problem solving, which is what I really think design is. And so I just was really enamored by that. Love the idea of using creative to drive influence and to figure out moves for various companies. That led me into the agency world where I worked for a number of years here locally at a pretty large agency that ranged from about 120 to 130 in its heyday while I was there. And so as I worked my way up from, junior creative, putting in my time to mid-level senior animator and then eventually art director, there's a couple of things that I learned over that tenure at this agency. One is just how much I really appreciated the creative community. Coming in from College of Design, it was a really competitive place. I mean, I loved it there, but it was competitive. You're trying to be the best you can be. And people's tricks and habits, they kind of kept those close to the chest. And so getting into the professional world and meeting these other creatives who are like, hey, let me see if I can help you and show you how that's done. Or here's a little tip or trick you could do. I just got a lot of mentorship from these older creatives around me, and it wasn't lost on me. The other thing that I really loved about the creative space is the collaboration opportunities, not only in working with teams where folks find the best part of a project for them and other people are mixed in, but also with the clients, really understanding what they're trying to achieve, the true KPIs of a project. So not just making something to look cool, but making something to drive action. Love both those elements. As I moved forward at this agency, though, one of the things I ran into was this bit of a silo. I'm sure folks on your podcast can relate to this with new senior management, new roles and responsibilities. All of a sudden, you kind of become siloed from your team. You have a lot more on your plate. And the next thing you know, the stuff that I really liked, the collaboration and the really quality creative, was kind of falling by the wayside. And that's when the idea kind of struck me that maybe I could go off on my own. Maybe there's a better way to do this than just trying to make as much money as possible and trying to just produce as much creative as possible. That a more bespoke approach, a collaborative approach with your clients and your team is the way to do it. And that's how Dash Studio was started back in 2015. And what's funny is I think a lot of folks go into the entrepreneurship space because they've always wanted to do that. I will admit that was never me. I was like, I just want to work at a cool place. And I think starting with that authenticity and this drive for creative and community, and that just being really true to who myself and my business partner, Corey Livengood, are, really helped us and defined our success, because quickly 2 became 4, became 6, 8. And the next thing you know, 9 years later, we're 12 full-timers and we bring on anywhere from 10 to 20 contractors over the course of a year. So that's a little bit of background on my side from design, getting into this animation and motion graphics space and where we are today with Dash Studio.
No, I love that. And I generally like to start out episodes getting an understanding or a definition of what we're going to talk about, just to make sure that I'm on the same page as you and understanding what we're looking at with community building. So for you, how do you define community building? What does that look like to you?
No, it's a really great question. I think it's been topical more than it's ever been before with the pandemic coming around and the dispersion of teams and working remotely. How do you build culture? When I think about community, I'm thinking about culture. I'm thinking about people that want to go to bat for one another. I think about your support network. If you think back to any major moment in your life, whether you're navigating grief, a breakup, maybe a big move across the country, there's a group that you tend to kind of counsel when all that's going on. It's your friends, it's your close circle, it's your community of people that you trust. And I think what's really interesting with the advent of all this new tech, all this new change that's coming, I think that resurgence and people seeking out their own communities has never been more popular than it is now. And so we're seeing a lot more culture focused intention with companies. You're seeing more meetups that are spawning up in different cities around the country and the world. And so for me, if I was truly to define community, it's your support network. It's the group of people who you're willing to go to bat for, and they're willing to go to bat for you.
That's very interesting because most, when most people talk about community building it, on LinkedIn and things like that, it naturally falls into the how can we generate revenue off of this? What can we do to build out a community of customers so that we can leverage that to test new product ideas and understand what we should launch and run special deals and then have brand advocates that are promoting for us. This aspect of community building, very important that you're talking about focusing on having a community to really help you grow as a person and understand your craft or your skill and continue through your career that way, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I think there is
Okay.
overlap. But if you start with a transactional meeting, right, where it just feels like you're trying to use the other person to generate a sale or to drive some revenue, it just doesn't feel authentic. And I think what we've learned with user generated content, UGC, and kind of where we are in the content creation space, I mean, people can see, I don't even know if we can curse on this, pardon my French, the bullshit of it, right? If you're not being authentic. So to me, I think there's overlap. I think if you genuinely try to help the people around you, help your community, lift them up with no ulterior motive, you'll naturally find that they'll in turn support you. And in fact, we actually have data to prove that. This past March, I spoke at Off Fest in Barcelona. It's this big international creative festival that happens. And the topic of conversation was the value of community. We talk about the importance of getting to know people, of networking, of supporting one another. But what does that actually translate to in a monetary space? That because there is business results that do come from being genuine and helping other people. And what we realized as a studio is that I went back and I traced every project we've ever done over the last 9 years and asked myself, how did we get this work? Who sent it our way? And this probably doesn't surprise you, Colby, but 84% of that work came from someone we know or who recommended us.
Oh,
If you
wow.
look at our top 10 clients, the top 10 highest spending clients we've ever worked with, the number one client is the result of a freelancer who came to the Dash Bash. It's an animation and motion design festival we throw biennially here in Raleigh. Came to the event, had an amazing time. And when his client asked him, hey, can you handle this extra workload? He was like, I'm just a freelancer. I can't do it. They asked, who would you recommend that we go work with? He said, go reach out to Dash Studio. That happens because of genuine investment in the industry. Our second biggest client is came from a direct competitor of ours. I mean, this is someone we've lost work to in our industry on bids. And they said, you know what, this isn't quite the right fit for us, but Mac, Dash, and the team over there, they would be a perfect fit. And then our third biggest client has come from peers of mine that I've worked with over the years that we've kind of grown into more leadership positions together, where it's like, oh my gosh, I trust Mac. I know Mac. He's a good, authentic person. And so what it really starts to lay the groundwork for me is that if you don't make it transactional, you are generally trying to go out there and just help people, connect with people, that there is a natural business side that comes from it, but it doesn't have to start at that point.
Yeah. And I think, new clients, new revenue, that's one thing that agencies are always looking for, right? But there's another big challenge or another big opportunity, which is hiring. And I think that network and community is one of the best drivers for finding talent or for finding team members to come on board. Have you seen that on your end? Do you leverage your community to hire out?
100%. And in fact, it was an intentional strategy that we did in the early days of our studio. There's kind of two mindsets we had when we first began our agency. One was that we target marketers. Everything we're putting out there, the voice, the cadence is sort of tailored towards the marketing mindset because those are the people that hire us. And then the other idea we kicked around was, how do we make Dash Studio one of the best in our own industry? How do we make it a place where everyone wants to work at and wants to lift up? And what we realized is that if we could get our industry support, if we could have the best, most talented creatives want to work for our shop, we're naturally going to start to win work because the work is going to get better. And that's where we played our cards. So in the early days of Dash, maybe not the most financially savvy move, but we would hire the absolute best freelancers, even though I didn't have the budget for it, to try to get their quality of work. I would pay them early. We'd pay them on time. We'd give them all the creative exploration that we could, given the constraints of the clients, so that they had an immaculate experience. And what we found is as soon as they work with us, they're like, oh my gosh, this was an amazing project. They were more willing to share the work that we had partnered on together. They were telling their friends about how great our studio was. So very quickly in the early days, we didn't have an issue delivering on quality of work because our roster was quickly growing and kind of building into that. And so now, fast forward 9 years later, to your question, as far as like recruitment, employee retention, we have, for an internship, for example, that we just had, we had well over 100 applicants for an internship position. And the reason we do that is because of our ability to kind of treat the community well, do all these things for the community. We pay our interns well. I haven't met anyone in the creative space who's been paying more than $20 an hour to interns, which is what we do currently. And so again, I think when you make the investments to be one of the leaders in your space, you're going to attract the right talent. And that's ultimately going to be a snowball effect that kind of propels you into the future as the quality of your work then gets better and better.
For sure. And we're on the performance side of things with creative. So we do not as in-depth creative as you do, but, we focus on paid ads, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And when you invest in the better UGC creators, when you invest in the better post-production creative or creative strategist, the creative has longer legs, if you will, or it lasts longer in the ad account. So it has a better payoff in terms of what the client's investing in the creative. And then it helps you create a longer lifetime value with your clients as well. And I'm sure for you, it helps, continue to get contracts with clients as you're doing your work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a good reminder that even with the advent of AI and some of these new tools and more creators in the space than there's ever been before, there's a bottom line mindset that sometimes people think about when it comes to creative. What is the cheapest I can do? What is the baseline level? But what you just mentioned and what performs the best is a good reminder that quality is still what is going to cut through the noise that's out there. And when you invest in quality, you get quality returns.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's, especially with UGC, when there's those platforms that give you the $79 videos and things like that, but you get $79 quality and it doesn't, it runs for a couple of days and then you just waste a lot of budget on it. Right. So ultimately you're wasting a lot of time, energy, and effort there. I know you said that you have that event, and I'd love to hear more about that. But what type of community building activities do you do? Are they mainly in person? Do you do any type of online community building?
Yeah, I think there's two things that we put focus on. One is like internal community building that we have with our internal teams, and then there's the external presence that we put out there. From an internal basis, over COVID-19, we ended up moving to a remote workforce. So we used to have everyone based in North Carolina, but now we're operating in 6 different states. We have staff in Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, New York, and Massachusetts. And so with having a remote staff, how do you build that culture? How do you create that glue that makes everyone feel connected, even though they feel separate? So, a lot of it's a learning lesson. I think something that is a good reminder is that perfection inhibits progress. It's a go-to motto for me. And what I really get at with that is that you got to try stuff and you got to be willing and open to being wrong and then making adjustments based on that. But over the years, what we have found is that there's a balance. You want to have team building events and things, but you don't want to have so many where it feels like, why the heck are we having another Zoom call for a team meeting? So what we have found is a good balance is every morning we have something called a stand up where our entire team gets on at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's about a 15-20 minute call where usually we just run through work and maybe just some light fodder on what people have been up to. On Mondays, we have everyone share a picture for what they've worked on over the weekend if they want to. So if someone did something that was especially unique or something they want to share with the team, they can post a picture and it gives us a grounding place to kind of talk about that. So just provides a little bit of conversation to start our Mondays off. And then on Wednesdays, we typically do a Wednesday recap where we'll run through different projects we're working on as a company. Because one of the things that we run into as you get as a larger agency, I mean, we have anywhere from 16 to 22 projects going on at one given time. So it's very easy for team members to not even realize the creative that's going on at the studio. So this is an opportunity for our art directors, creative director to share some of the great work that our team's doing. I skipped right over Tuesday. We do Tuesday inspiration. So we do a rotation where each individual on the team can talk about something that inspires them. It doesn't even have to be creative necessarily. One of the recent ones, our art director, John McGowan, he has a couple little kids. And so he's gotten into bedtime stories and reading all these children's books. So he did an expose on some of his favorite children's books that he was doing. So that was a little bit of an inspiration. And then on Fridays, we do learning lessons. So these are a rotating monthly series where we have internal folks as well as external folks come and do a quick teaching session on something they learned or a cool new trick. And while it feels really elemental, honestly, these little pieces really help with that congruent community feeling energy that we hold in high regard. And so there's that piece of it. And then there's also kind of the systems that we have in place to, check on staff's well-being. We do a lot with HR from a scoring system. And so how do you feel this week? We ask for a 1 through 5 scoring ranking. And what that does also is just to ensure mental health is in a good place. So if someone's score is low for a couple of weeks, that's a signal to me as a manager that says, hey, maybe I need to check in on this person. Maybe they need a break on one of these projects, or maybe they need a day off. And conversely, if the whole studio as a whole has a lower score, it's maybe we need to juice up the morale by doing an internal project or something pro bono for a nonprofit, something along those lines. So that helps a lot. So those are some of the internal things we're doing. And then for the external stuff, a lot of the focus comes into the Dash Bash, which is an animation and motion design festival we throw in Raleigh, North Carolina every couple of years. It's grown from 200, 300 to this next year in June 11th through 13th, 2025. We're expecting about 500 of the nation's best animators and motion designers to come to the table. And what I love about our event, Colby, is, I go to a lot of conferences, and one thing I've noticed is there's a tendency sometimes, especially in the creative space, for speakers to get on stage and to basically say, hey, look how great I am. Look at all this work. Doesn't it look amazing? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all love some good eye candy, right? But I think what people really want out of speakers is some more depth. They want to know hey, what did you struggle with? How did you overcome it? And what are some tangible takeaways that I have that I can, adjust for myself to be a better leader, better freelancer? And so some of the speakers we've had in the past have been this group Cabeza Patata, who talks about the power of saying no. We've had Amanda Gaudreau, who's an immigrant to the United States and talking about going to school in the US and feeling lonely, but then also finding her community as she graduated. We've had this group BN, who's a good friend of mine, this gentleman named Ricardo, who is an inclusive motion design studio, and talking about what that means in designing characters with intention. So it's not just changing color of skin tone to be more inclusive, but it's actually recognizing body types. So all these really deep conversations in conjunction with, of course, the best thing that makes conferences so fun is time to network and hang out and get to know people. So those are sort of our two big avenues and platforms that I think we really lean into the community side on.
All that sounds great. And definitely keep me in the loop as you have the event coming up next year. Would love to, with no cost, push that on our podcast and our channels as well, just to get as many people out there as possible.
Oh, thanks, Colby. That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that.
Raleigh needs more creative and marketing events. There's New York, there's Miami, there's California, there's Austin, Texas for e-commerce and for different marketing events. But Raleigh has an opportunity. It just doesn't have a ton of events, at least that I know of. But
100%. I think you're right. And it's a disservice to where we are as an industry right now. Everything is so remote. People are living in various nooks and crannies around the world, and middle market in the US is growing and thriving. So I'm there with you. Let's get more creatives into the marketers into the Raleigh area.
I'd love it. Yeah, I would love that. I'm going to kind of shift gears here. I've had a couple of questions come to mind as you were talking, but as a creative agency owner, how do you feel about working hours for your business? You probably have 8 to 4, 9 to 5, but creative work hits you at random times. Creative thoughts hit you at random times. So how do you feel about leniency or openness to letting work hours be flexible? What's your policies like there?
No, that's a really great question. For us, we find that particularly with the creative work, we have pretty tight turnarounds for the projects we take on.
Mm.
Usually we're looking at 8 to 10 weeks, if not less, for some of the stuff we're doing. And as a result, you time is a necessity. You have to have as much of it as possible. So where we landed is that we expect folks to be here from 9 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with an hour break throughout the day. Now, what we have done and what we have tried to audition is over the course of the last couple of years with remote working, there's been a lot of questions on things like mental health days or 4-day work weeks. And so I was curious. We asked ourselves back in December a couple of years ago, is a 4-day work week possible for our industry? And so we actually set out to try to prove it and see if we can make it happen. There were some caveats with it, but we started with this idea that our staff was just feeling so burned out from, just consistent and constant work coming in the door that we tried to figure out various ways to do breaks. So the way we shaped it was we said, Q1, we're going to take 1 day off a month, right? So we'll try to do 1 day off a month for mental health day. Q2, we'll take 2 days. Q3, 3, and Q4, hopefully by that time, we're hitting 4 days off a month, which essentially would be a 4-day work week. That was our goal. But we also said that there was no guarantee we would move up the days of the next quarter if we felt like it wasn't working. So Q1, we went through it and it was a breeze. I mean, we were able to easily take off 1 day a month, and we had a success rate of 100%. That was not a problem. We were able to do it every month. That month had 1 day off. Q2, when we moved up to 2 days, we were still able to do it 100% for 2 days a month with a mental health day, but it got a little bit trickier. A lot of times, especially with Fortune 500 clients that we're working with, there is meeting days that are non-negotiable. Stakeholders are only in the office at this point in time. They have to have a conversation. So we started to notice that leadership had to be available maybe for a quick 30-minute call or something while the rest of our staff could take off. Q3 is where we ran into the most problems. So we were only 66% successful. So 6 of the 9 days we were trying to take off is what we could do. And what we ended up running into at that point in time was just we didn't have enough days to work on the projects and get things done. So staff started to feel stressed, like they just didn't have quite enough. And so by the time we got to Q4, we actually ended up not moving forward to the 4 days. We actually went back to the 2 days. So we did this whole study. And 17 of the 21 mental health days, or 81%, were taken on Monday through Friday, resulting in 3-day weekends. So 32% of the weekends in 2022, which is when we did this, were 3-day weekends for the Dash staff, which is great. We ended up taking off 21 days as a studio in that year. And it was also one of the more profitable years we've ever had. So I think from a data standpoint, to say like, great, most profitable year we ever had, and the staff was in a really good place, I think all that was really good. So while we ended up coming to the consensus that we can't do a 4-day work week, what we did roll into this was 2 mental health days. And we still keep that up to this point in time, where 2 days a month, we try to shut down the company, give everyone a mental health day. And so I think it's going to change for each of your listeners who are listening to this. You got to find the right solution for you. Some folks might be able to have, as you alluded to earlier, open hours on just like, hey, put in 8 hours at some point in the day. Other groups like us are a little bit more tied to the business hours because we're having so many meetings and deliverables, but you can still work in things like mental health days, which can do a lot for your team.
Yeah. And how do you feel about mental health when it comes to client feedback? And I'll give you a reason for that question. So, we work with technical team members, so media buyers, people that are doing, the actual placement of the ads. And then we work with creatives, so creative strategists, designers. It generally seems that there's more emotional attachment to creative work than it is emotional attachment to media buying, campaign structures. Are you doing ABO or CBO or those different types of things? And it can have more of an impact if there is negative client feedback to creative versus how are you setting up your campaigns. Most all clients are going to have opinions about a creative. Most all clients are not going to be looking under the hood in your ad account and wondering how you're setting up your campaigns and asking you why you're not doing this or that. Do you see any similarities on your side with the creative feedback impact? And do you have any sort of strategies or buffers or things you've done for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is tough because there is a stark delineation between art and design. Art, I'm
Mm,
going to make what I like. This looks great. This is my
mm,
choice, my intention. I don't care what you think. Here it is. Design is solving a problem. And no matter how objective we try to make it, it is still a subjective place. So we can come up with the right solution, the right creative. We know in our hearts of hearts that this is the right way to go, and we can have a stakeholder come in and say, we're just not vibing with it, or I'm not feeling it, right? And we have to come up with a solution. So the folks who have been in our industry a while, the designers who have been here a while, they tend to get it a bit more. They understand you're not going to get every win, and that there's a little bit more of a commercialization of our world. So that's not too hard for their morale. Where I see it the most is honestly junior designers who are coming from a world of school where they're coming up with these amazing ideas, they're bringing it to fruition, and they might be getting feedback, but it's still their core idea that hasn't changed. And so that can be troubled to try to navigate that, as a junior animator. Be like, what do you mean I spent all this time on it and they don't like it? I thought this was the direction they want to go. It's like, yeah, but a stakeholder weighed in late and we need to change it. And so what we try to do at Dash is basically be very picky on what we try to push back on. So we try to be accommodating on some things, but if there's something we really truly hold in high regard that we feel like this is the right decision, we'll try to push back on it. But I think at the end of the day, just being in the space that we are, you just understand that there's going to be changes sometimes that you don't want to do, that you have to make. And so the way that we really try to balance that out and offset it is just taking on more pro bono or internal projects. Some of our most creative work we've done, I feel like, has been something we've done for the holidays, or an internal thing, or a pro bono for a charitable organization. And so you got to have this balance, right? There are some projects that bring in the money, but if you are just exclusively focusing on that and not on all the creative work, the morale can dip. So then you got to do those internal projects or the pro bono projects to like bring up the morale. They're really fun, but you just can't let the paying client work drop too much. So there's just a couple of levers you got to play. But I think as long as you have something going on that the staff can get excited about, usually that helps mitigate any pushback that you might get on subjective feedback.
Yeah, I think that differentiation between, you said, art and creative, is a very good point out there. And for us, it helps as well to have the mindset with data. I think, I've interviewed a lot of designers, and most of them do not have um, data tied into their portfolio or comprehension of how past things they've done for agencies perform, just because they often get left out of the data conversations that way. So for us, it's very helpful to incorporate data into the conversation with designers to see how things did and then base future actions off of that as well. Because at the end of the day, we're a performance creative agency. We're not a brand creative agency or anything like that as
But it's
well.
those partnerships that I think really do make endeavors and campaigns successful, because you're 100% right. In a way, as creators, we're like chefs in the kitchen,
Mm.
and you're almost the waiter taking the stuff out to the patron. And so the vibe, what the dining room's feeling, if they're like ordering something but they don't think they really want it that way, you can bring it back and kind of give some of that nuance. And in the back, we can do 4-course dinners, or we can put out some appetizers or a burger and french fries depending on what people want, right? And so I think some of the best projects are very attuned to the data that the wait staff is getting, and then curated with the kitchen in the back on what we're going to serve up. So I think I love that duality to it.
Yeah, and you may disagree on this one. If you do, please let me know. But I think with media buying, right? So somebody knows how to run Facebook ads. That does not mean they know how to run Google ads, and that does not mean they know how to run Snapchat ads, right? They don't know how to navigate the interface. They don't know how to do the keyword selection for Google just because they know how to do Facebook stuff. If somebody knows how to design a logo, that does not mean they know how to make a good YouTube thumbnail or how to make a good Facebook ad that's going to have a good hook in the first 3 seconds. So one thing that I have noticed as well is, if a designer that we're hiring for Facebook ads is not fully bought in on being the best Facebook ad creative expert out there, the interest is going to wean over time, and it's going to kind of fall off in terms of how much effort they're putting into that and how open they are to feedback to improve hook rates and CTR and stuff like that. And I think that it's overlooked, but it's very helpful to have creatives that do specialize at one specific aspect of creative or one specific channel versus just saying, oh, you make, landing pages, then sure, make our ads as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think at one point I would have agreed with you wholeheartedly on that. I think the market is changing a little bit.
Okay.
You do, in my opinion, have to be focused. We're not going to sit here and say that, hey, we're going to design a web page for you, right? It's like, no, we are motion designers, which is an umbrella term that covers video and animation. That's our bread and butter, right? So we're not going beyond that. But within that umbrella, within that space of video, we have started to target ourselves as a bit more of a generalist studio. And I think the reason why we're finding success in that is traditionally you would have these AORs, right? Agency of record. So company hires agency of record to do all their stuff. They want to do web design. They want to do their branding. They want to do animation and video. They do all of it. Well, fast forward, the tools in which we use to create this stuff is getting easier to understand and learn. In-house teams are starting to develop because these companies are trying to save money. So they're saying, maybe I don't need an AOR. Maybe what I need is just a branding studio or a marketing shop or a video production agency. So now you're getting a bit more of these kind of, still specialized, but they're going out for these little groups. And so that's where we've been for the last 10 years or so. What I see changing now is that clients are starting to ask just a little bit more of each of these smaller shops. They enjoy the boutique experience. They enjoy the smaller teams they get to work with. But now they're starting to say, like, when we had an agency record, they could kind of do everything. Could y'all do a little bit of this or do a little bit more? And so I think this is where there's a unique balance, because you, of course, want to help with your legacy clients. You don't want to say no. So you want to open your purview up a little bit, but you don't want to open it so wide where it's like, to your point, you just become like a master of none, or what's the saying, do a little bit of everything, master of none. I know that's not the saying. I totally butchered that, but you know what I'm saying? So I think that you were right in that. And I would agree that you have to be in sort of a niche space. But within that niche space, I think there's more of an ask to be a generalist than ever before. Because at the end of the day, one thing I will say with all this new tech and stuff coming out is the people that are going to make it into the future of creative are going to be the ones who are ultimately what? Problem solvers, right? That's what people are hiring for. And I think when you're a problem solver, you're naturally taking on a little bit more of things. So I think I would agree with most of what you said, just that slight difference there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think my perspective of it is with the actual, so not the agency level, but the actual designer level, drop off in attention, drop off in focus, drop off in buy-in. If they really want to be doing branding and brand guides and stuff like that, they don't care about doing Facebook ads, right? So that's an mistake I've made in the past, is hiring somebody that was really good at branding, but after 3 months of working with us on Facebook ads, kind of started to lose attention and effort a bit, just because they weren't doing the passion projects. You know what I mean? They weren't doing the things that they wanted to be a specialist at that way.
100%. Yeah. You gotta be aligned, both of y'all on the project.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's like, it gets back into, why are you saying yes to a project? I think sometimes in our space, there's a scarcity mindset. Is there work coming around the corner that I really want to do? Is there the right project around the corner that's going to keep me afloat? And this worry comes in and you start saying like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can take on that project, but it's not moving you towards the goal and the stuff that you want to do. And the next thing you know, to your point, you start taking on things that are pushing you in a direction that you're not the best at and you really aren't excited about. And that just, to your point, kind of dissolves the relationship from the get-go. So I agree with that.
Sure. Well, Mac, this has been a good conversation. If anybody is looking to get in contact with you or learn about your agency, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely check us out online at dashstudio.net. And then we're also really active on Instagram if you want a little inspiration in your feed at dash_NC. And definitely would encourage folks in and around the Southeast, or honestly, in the US in general, to check out our festival called the Dash Bash. So that's at dashbash.net. June 11th through 13th, 2025. It's going to be an inclusive group of creators in and around the animation and video space, but it's going to be an incredibly good time. And you get to see the wonderful area we call home, which is Raleigh.
Raleigh has great food, great weather, a lot of great stuff out and about. Well, Mac, great having you on. Good to connect with you and look forward to having a chat in the future.
Yeah, sounds great, Colby. Thanks so much for the time.